Can you guys hear that? What is up, guys? So today we are back with another deep dive, diving deeper into the Nightmare Cup, and today we're actually looking at a mythical Pokemon that a lot of you guys actually voted for, which I was kind of surprised. Once I started looking into Celebi, I was actually kind of thinking like, this Charge Beam could actually set us up for some interesting things. Considering we do carry that grass typing, we could kind of be a really good wall to the water types. But it didn't quite turn out that way. So let's actually figure out why. So Celebi is a Psychic and Grass type Pokemon, maxing out at level 40 with 15s across the board. You can achieve a 3265. Now, considering that Celebi was a special research Pokemon, the minimum IV that you can have one is 10, 10, 10. And at the moment, as far as I know, there is no way to actually trade Celebi, right? Either way, assuming that that is correct, at least for the purpose of this video, I did at least do some digging and figure out that a 10 on attack, 15 defense, and 13 stamina at level 16.5 does actually net you a 1499. Being that you catch Celebi at level 15 from that special research, if you actually have that IV spread, then you only have to power it up a few times and you've got 1499. Now, according to my spreadsheet and all the math that I have ran, Celebi actually ranks somewhere around 22nd in bulk and 24th in stat product. And of course, that all comes from the base stats here with 210 on attack, 210 defense, which I'm liking it, and then the 225 on stamina. That's actually a pretty good PvP spread. Then we actually get into our moves here. And Celebi has a really interesting, perplexing situation. I'm not really sure if Niantic even really considered the moves that they give Celebi here, but we've got this grass typing with not a single grass move. So that kind of sucks because that ends up meaning that we don't have anything to actually push damage for one of our typings. But we do actually have some psychic moves, so that's at least something, right? Well, for our fast moves, we do have Confusion and Charge Beam. And like I said, that Charge Beam was sounding really enticing. So Confusion is our first fast move here. 3 energy per turn for 4 damage per turn with a whopping 4.8 after stab, which is, of course, always good, like always. Then we have Charge Beam for 3.67 energy for a 1.67 damage per turn. So not that great as in terms of like damage, but at least the energy is better than Confusion, right? Then we move on to our charge moves here. We have 3 different charge moves. Of course, we only have 1 stab candidate here, so we have Hyper Beam costing 80 for 150 damage at a 1.88 damage per energy ratio, so pretty good. No stab bonus there, of course. Psychic here costing 70 for 100 damage at a 1.43, which after stab does bump up to 120 damage for a 1.71, which is also very nice. Dazzling Gleam costing 70 for 110 at a 1.57. You know, at this point, like, they should just really give Celebi that fairy typing because the Onion Fairy deserves it. So in terms of these actual moves here, I tried several different scenarios. And let me just say that for this entire video, we're actually going to go with Confusion, Psychic, and Dazzling Gleam. When we get to our shields, I'll actually tell you how Charge Beam worked. And I actually tried to make it work very hard, but it just... Speaking of shields, let's actually move on over here to our shielding section. So in our first shield scenario, we actually have this 0 versus 0, or kind of like a mock-up closing type situation. I don't have any shields and neither does my opponent. We actually end up winning 30.4% of those matches with Celebi. That's not too bad. I mean, you know, we like to see at least 20%. That means we at least have enough Pokemon under our belt to consider beating at least one full typing. So that's pretty nice. Now, if we actually go with this Charge Beam moveset, which by the way, the Charge Beam moveset that I did try out was Charge Beam, Hyper Beam, and Psychic instead of the Dazzling Gleam. Considering that we actually do get a little bit of a bump in our energy, I did figure that maybe Hyper Beam would be a little bit worth it. It did actually show improvements on a couple of different movesets utilizing Charge Beam, but basically Charge Beam, Hyper Beam, and Psychic only ends up winning 26.1 here. So definitely a downgrade. Our next shield scenario here is this 2 versus 0, which is where I have 2 shields, my opponent doesn't have any shields. We actually end up winning 93.5% of these matches. Not too shabby. Now, we're actually not really concerned about the ones that we win against. If I have complete shield advantage, I'm actually concerned about the ones that I lose against, because that ends up telling me what the hardcore counters to Celebi are. And actually, you wouldn't be too surprised here, a lot of the bug types that can utilize a bug type fast move really do start to tear through us. Remember that we do carry a 4x weakness because Psychic and Grass are both going to be weak to bugs, so a lot of those bug type Pokemon really start to chew through us. If we're talking about the Charge Beam moveset, we actually go down from that 93.5 down to 83.7. It still ends up being a lot of bug types that still end up beating us there. Next scenario is actually this 0 versus 2, or when I don't have any shields, my opponent actually has 2 shields. We actually end up winning only 12%. At least we're hitting the double digits there, but that's actually the 12% that I'm really concerned about here. Because if my opponent actually has complete shield advantage, I'd like to know which Pokemon I can still just end up beating. This one's not as clear cut as the 2 versus 0. Basically, if we can take resisted damage from them and at least deal neutral damage back, we actually have that win. Some things that pop up here are some of the water types that only have access to water type moves, and really that's about it. Basically, if we can at least deal neutral damage while they're dealing resisted damage, we can kind of count that as a win in the 0 versus 2. Now, if we switch over to the Charge Beam moveset, 0%. We don't win a single matchup here. And that was really surprising because I was really hoping that Charge Beam would at least be able to do something up against the water types, but no. Then we switch over to our last shielding scenario, which is this 2 versus 2, or kind of like the opening type situation, if you will. With this moveset, we actually end up winning 55.4. Not too shabby. If we switch over to the Charge Beam moveset, 4.3. Yes, 4.3. So what does that actually end up telling us? Well, that tells you that the Charge Beam moveset is a no-go. I mean, it's like hyper specialist, but even then, like, it's not really hitting on a whole lot. It doesn't win. It's way too kamikaze. You've got to like love Celebi to run that moveset. And even then, you got to be kind of like out of your mind at least. What it actually ends up telling us though is for our actual moveset with Confusion, Psychic, and Dazzling Gleam, we actually end up prefer to open with Celebi here. We do statistically win more matches when we open rather than close, which is pretty nice. So in our next section, we're actually going to talk about some matchups here. So in all of the deep dives, I end up taking our subject Pokemon, Celebi today, and I end up throwing them up against the top 10 bulkiest Pokemon in the cup just to kind of figure out how they do. Well, in this scenario, what I actually end up doing is going to pvpoke.com. I will put in Celebi here. I will give it the moveset that we actually plan to use. Confusion, Dazzling Gleam, Psychic. And then I'll actually go from single battle to multi-battle and then choose from all Pokemon to custom for me personally. And then I actually do have a custom team set up of 15 different Pokemon, which are all of the top 10 bulkiest Pokemon, with Suicune actually broken up into several different movesets here. So you can kind of see that Suicune has Extra Sensory, Hidden Power Water, Snarl, Hidden Power Bug, Hidden Power Ground, Hidden Power Grass, just to kind of give some variety of the top usable hidden powers for Suicune to see how we do. Of course, for these scenarios, I actually want to go with a 1v1 shield situation to try to give the most evenness to both Pokemon. And let's actually see how we do here. So 7 wins and 8 losses. Out of the top 10? Well, we're actually going to figure out what that Suicune matchup ends up doing to us right here. So as you can see, we do actually end up winning against Shuckle, Jumpluff, Tentacruel, and then Suicune here. So Suicune is a win if it has Extra Sensory, Hidden Power Water, Hidden Power Ground, or Hidden Power Grass. You can see though that right here, Suicune with Snarl actually can end up getting to the Celebi, which makes a lot of sense considering that we carry that Psychic typing. That Dark type move is going to be able to penetrate pretty good. Considering that we do win the majority of those matchups, I am going to throw the Suicune into the win column, at least for Celebi here. But then we start to get into our losses. So Lantern, you know, one of the ones that I was hoping that we would do good up against, but no. Lapras, Azumarill, Mantine, Suicune with Hidden Power Bug. Yeah, that could be a case, but still. 2 wins for Suicune versus 4 losses still does mean the majority vote ends up going to a win there. Then we actually have Dugong and Fortress actually rounding out the top 10 for us. So 4 wins and 6 losses doesn't mean we're hitting on a whole lot for the top 10, which is kind of a bummer. Now let's actually look into some matchups for specific types, at least, with our Celebi here. So in this section, I actually call it the countering section to try to figure out what we should focus our attention on with Celebi versus what should we actually bring to the table to combat a Celebi if we're worried about seeing one at a tournament. Well, as far as what we should focus our attentions on, the grass is a pretty good typing to go up against. So if we're going on PvPoke, we're actually selecting Celebi with our moveset just like before. We're going to select the entire Rainbow Cup this time, and of course keep it as 1 shield versus 1 shield. We're going to hit battle, and then you can see here a 41.3% win ratio with 1 versus 1. So let's actually get into some grass. So if we go and we type grass right there. So as you can see here, we do actually do pretty well up against the grass types. Ivysaur and Venusaur are 2 that are pretty important. Having a direct counter to both Ivysaur and Venusaur could be pretty helpful, but it kind of does make Celebi feel like a one-trick pony. Then we do have Oddish, Victory Bell, Gloom, Weeping Bell, Vileplume, Bayleaf, Sunflora, Execute, Meganium. Yeah, we're starting to get into that gray area here. So Execute is a tie. Then we start to get into the Meganium, which is a loss, and then Tangela, Executor, Blossom, Celebi, Parasect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Counting is hard. Next, let's look into the electric type matchup here. So you can see Ampharos, Raichu, Chinchou, Zapdos, Electabuzz, Jolteon, and Flaffy are all wins for us. And then we have Electrode, Magnemite, Lantern, Raikou, and Magneton all end up losing. So it is about 50-50, maybe one more win than loss there. So I guess you could consider that a positive for Celebi, but there's not really like a big trend here. I mean, what's the trend between Ampharos, Raichu, Zapdos, and Jolteon? And then on the other hand, Magneton, Raikou, Magnemite, I mean, it's just really awkward. It seems like the matchups just kind of go like literally down to base stats. That's almost what it feels like. Next, let's look into the fire typing, and as you can see here, Growlithe, Magby, Arcanine, Flareon are our only wins. Charmeleon, Quilava, Magmar, Ponyta, Charizard, Typhlosion, Moltres, Rapidash, Entei, Ninetales, Magcargo, Ho-Oh, and Houndoom all actually end up beating us there. I'm sure Houndoom is actually utilizing a dark type. Yeah, a dark type move. Even if we switch it to Fire Fang here, it should still up outpacing us by quite a lot there, as you can see. And then Ho-Oh, I'm sure is using Hidden Power Dark. Oh, Hidden Power Bug, even better. So the Ho-Oh is kind of a toss-up. I really doubt you're going to see Ho-Oh anyways, but at least you see it's there. Next, we actually have the bug typing, and as you can imagine, this one's pretty bad. So Ariados is actually a win, Heracross is a win, and Beedrill is a win, and what do those 3 have in common? A weakness to the psychic typing. Other than that though, Pineco, Venomoth, Yanma, Parasect, Scyther, Butterfree, Pinsir, Ladian, Scizor, and Fortress are all a big deal for us to overcome, and it doesn't look good. Last but not least here, let's actually take a look at the water typing, and this one actually looks pretty like half and half at first, but then it gets really weird. So we do win up against a couple of things that's not like super surprising. Krabby, Quillfish, Golduck, Chinchou, Kabuto, Seadra, Poliwrath was actually there, I think I skipped it. Seadra, Tentacruel, Ammonite, Poliwhirl, Slowking, meh. Then we start to get into a tie with Seaking, and then it just starts to lose here. So Quagsire is a loss, Lantern is a loss, Vaporeon is a loss, Gyarados, Crocodile, Kabutops, Feraligatr, I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. Starmie here, I'm sure is using Hidden Power Bug. Yep. And then we have Dugong, Slowbro. I mean, it's just really awkward with Celebi here. I can't. After making this deep dive, I honestly cannot recommend using Celebi. The matchups, while it could be a hard counter to some Pokemon like we talked about with Venusaur and Ivysaur, oh, you really gotta have like all your other bases covered and feel like you have a weak matchup up against those 2 to really like convince me that Celebi would be a good idea on your team. I'm not really feeling it. But I'd like to know, are you guys actually digging the Celebi? let me know. I'd be interested to see what kind of ideas you guys have as far as how to make Celebi work, because I honestly don't have any. I can't figure out a way with its current moveset to actually make it work. Confusion is a great move, but in the Rainbow Cup, not as much as it has been in the past. It's important because it's great neutral damage, but that's about all it's got going for it here. And then we don't have access to a lot of really amazing moves that are meta impactful. Dazzling Gleam, Hyper Beam, both pretty neutral to a lot of different things. Psychic, even though it's a stab move, still gonna be really neutral to a lot of things, which kind of just ends up making us a really underwhelming performer here. I really do wish that Celebi at least had something in the grass area. At least something. Grass knot, or even a freaking fast move that was grass. Like, even if it had like Bullet Seed or something. Any move that has the grass typing associated with it would make it so much more impactful in this cup, but I can't recommend it at this point. But that is actually my take on Celebi, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. I really do want to hear you guys' opinion on Celebi below, because if I'm missing something, it could be really good. But as far as I can tell, Celebi's a no-go. So thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Remember that if you like to wow, I actually messed up the outro. I was gonna say if you have something for a deep dive, you can comment it.